It wasn't money that transformed me. It was silence. For years I believed that numbers shaped destinies and that promotions changed people. I waited for raises, recognition, goals achieved, like someone waiting for a sign that life is worth living. When they arrived, I was pleased, but nothing fit completely. What reorganized me came without spotlights, the decision to be quiet, to listen, and to care for what doesn't ask for applause. To go silent wasn't to disappear. It was to gather energy, close the cracks, learn to breathe with less urgency. I stopped explaining every choice, asking permission to have boundaries, tallying up approval. At first I found strange the emptiness that the absence of noise leaves. Then I realized that emptiness was space. In it there was room for attention, rest, the courage to say no, and tenderness toward myself. Silence took the other's gaze out of the center and repositioned my own. I didn't need to become cynical, cold, or inaccessible. I remained affectionate, but less available for the daily spectacle. I discovered that peace has a low voice, that maturity doesn't raise banners, that steady joy doesn't need an audience. When everything grew less noisy, I finally heard myself, and hearing myself was the true change. Since then, I've walked with discreet lightness, choosing the essential, keeping my heart steady, serene, whole, present today and always. It started simple, an almost invisible adjustment to the volume of my presence. I stopped announcing plans, turning every intention into a headline, replying immediately to prove efficiency. Instead of impulse, I cultivated pauses. I would breathe, think, and only then decide, often deciding not to decide so quickly. I disabled notifications, dimmed the shop windows, left conversations for when I could truly listen. At first, no one noticed. Later, subtle changes in the landscape appeared. Less eager messages, curiosities that withered without news, shorter meetings when there wasn't a list of accomplishments. I watched without resentment. It wasn't a test of others. It was a vote in favor of myself. In silence, textures appeared. The taste of coffee, the open window, the fine rain on the sidewalk, my pace when no one is watching. I discovered that noise distracted me from myself, as if I were a room full of echoes. With fewer echoes, I heard the furniture creak, the clock ticking, my real hunger. I learned to tell urgency from anxiety, importance from appearance, care from control. And little by little, I realized that saying less didn't diminish me. It returned density to me. I paid more attention to the margins of the day, tended to my sleep, reduced promises, accepted full pauses, and thus my presence gained contour, weight, and temperature, without needing decibels to exist. There was an episode that marked the border between before and after. I received a raise that in times past would have turned into toasts, photos, anxious speeches. That day I made coffee, walked slowly down the street, smiled inwardly, and fell quiet. When asked about news, I simply answered that I was learning to live at my own pace. I saw expressions searching for fireworks that didn't exist, applause that wouldn't come. It wasn't disdain, it was care. Without a stage, vanity had nothing to talk about. Without an audience, anxiety lost fuel. I realized that when I didn't offer a spectacle, certain bonds were left without a script. Others, however, remained light, interested in my well-being, not my results. That's when I understood. It wasn't money that unsettled those around me, but the absence of a show. Quietly, I celebrated with those who knew how to celebrate silence. I kept gratitude without postings, let victory breathe inside me, like someone who lights a candle and watches the flame without blowing. Later, I wrote 3 lines in my notebook, thanked the road, reviewed my boundaries, and promised myself to keep choosing sobriety, even when the world asked for noise to believe in itself. In that small gesture, I discovered a new strength, the capacity to suffice for myself, to recognize value without display, to honor each achievement with care, presence, time, silence, and peace. With silence, my relationships gained a different texture. Some refined, others peeled away without drama, like stickers that lose their glue when the surface stops being overly polished. When there was no list of accomplishments, certain conversations evaporated quickly. It hurt a little, because I realized I had been sustaining dialogues with performance reports. Without the showcase, the bond itself remained. And then it became clear who was interested in me and who was interested in my usefulness. I didn't judge. I simply took note with serenity. I began to value simple questions, unhurried listening, invitations without a second intention. Silence worked like a fine sieve. It let the gold pass and held back the glitter dust. I learned to say goodbye without guilt, to keep doors ajar, not to chase those who chose distance. The meetings that remained gained light humor, gentle depth, true availability. I discovered that presence isn't sustained by results, but by respect. When I said no, respect stayed. When I said yes, respect also stayed. It was a sign that there was health there, possible reciprocity. Loyalty, I noticed, preferred constancy to promises. It preferred eye to eye over any proof of greatness. And in that quieter ground, my joy began to grow roots that didn't depend on. Money reorganized spreadsheets and paid bills, but silence reorganized priorities and returned meaning to my choices. I learned to listen to the body when it asked for rest, to interrupt the rush before exhaustion occupied every space. I traded haste for rhythm, justifications for precision, promises for small and consistent deliveries, artificial urgencies for true priorities. I started asking whether each invitation sustained me inside, whether it strengthened the person I was becoming. When the answer was no, I honored the boundary calmly, without speeches, without guilt, without fear of disappointing expectations. I realized that coherence walks slowly, steps firmly, breathes long, preferring constancy to any shine that fades quickly. Silence taught me to value the interval between impulse and action, where wisdom rests and decides. In it I unload old weights, gather attention, repair cracks, reorganize affections, realign criteria, and move on less vulnerable to applause. The less noise I made, the clearer others' intentions became, and the more dignified my own decisions grew. I chose to care for what grows slowly, watering presence, patience, and clarity, knowing that maturity is a harvest without haste. In the end, I understood that peace doesn't need to prove value. It only needs to remain whole, steady, discreet, sustaining each step with meaning, and I gave thanks in silence. In the midst of the changes, an old friendship stayed close, solid, gentle, without asking for reports, without auditing my steps. We talked about coffee, about light rain on the rooftops, about old songs, and the small banalities that sustain the sweetness of days. There were laughs without explanation, silences without suspicion, pauses that didn't demand performance, a care that dispensed with any showcase. That constancy taught me that lucid affection doesn't trade presence for results, doesn't measure value by noise, doesn't pressure. If I said no, I received respect. If I said yes, I received partnership, without that demand disguised as care that tired me. Her presence worked like a delicate mirror, reminding me that I could also stay with myself without demanding a spectacle. That's when I understood that stillness is also conversation, that listening without interrupting is generosity, that welcoming pauses is trust. Around me, some relationships quietly melted like snow in the sun. There was no guilt, only a difference in requirements. I chose to tend to those that breathed with me, without jealousy of my silence, without fighting for attention, without tiring comparisons. There, trust grew like a sunlit plant, fed by honest availability, small kindnesses, real listening, presence that doesn't charge. And when I needed support, I found a safe place without publicity, just outstretched hands, attentive eyes, silence alongside, courage shared. With fewer explanations, my decisions became clear, not due to sudden cleverness, but because I stopped asking permission to exist. I began choosing projects for their meaning, not their shine, preferring consistency to spectacular promises that often evaporated. I negotiated deadlines with dignity, protected boundaries, refused improvised urgencies, accepted that saying no early prevents huge regrets later. I discovered that preventive rest is courage, that stopping early is mature protection, that better productivity is born of respected intervals. The old pursuit of approval, noisy and exhausting, gave way to a serene rhythm, almost invisible, yet deeply sustainable. Instead of proving value, I lived it. Instead of displaying confidence, I practiced it. Instead of running, I walked with constancy. With each quiet choice, my courage ceased to depend on applause and began to spring from my own ground. When doubts appeared, I returned to my body, to my notebooks, to small routines, and there I found signs enough to proceed. I realized that not every urgency is important. Not every invitation matches my timing. Not every opportunity deserves acceptance. I learned to be grateful for doors that closed early, sparing scars, and for doors that opened only when I fit. In the end, I understood that silence doesn't paralyze. It guides, it doesn't isolate. It selects, it doesn't impoverish. It matures, and it leads whole steps. When I spoke less, others began filling gaps with imagination, creating versions of me according to their fears and desires. Some thought I was secretly getting worse. Others swore I'd gotten rich. Others concluded I was lost. There were those who said I thought too highly of myself, those who interpreted silence as disdain, those who demanded public explanations. I stopped correcting narratives, not out of disdain, but to economize life, saving energy for what truly belonged to me. Those who wanted to know asked. Those who respected waited. Those who needed a show moved on, looking for another available showcase. My door stayed ajar for gentle arrivals, where people took off the shoes of judgment before entering the room. I began living with fewer justifications, fewer explanatory texts, more presence, more attention, more criteria for sharing achievements. When I truly needed to speak, I spoke. The rest belonged to the hours which clarify better than any defense made under pressure. Silence didn't manufacture mysteries. It merely removed the smoke that hid my intentions, revealing simplicity, focus, limits, respect, authenticity. I trusted that those who needed to stay would understand, and that those who needed to leave would find their path, without villains, without heroes, without rancor. I gained peace by not disputing versions. I breathed, cared for the house, opened more horizon for true, gentle encounters. As months passed, the change left discrete marks visible up close. Lighter mornings, more coherent choices, steady steps. Situations that once became crises yielded learning, and conflicts that took my breath gained enough clarity for honest conversations. When someone asked how I had changed so much, I answered without secrets, offering 3 simple keys: time, patience, silence. I explained that there is no shortcut to maturity, and that haste disguised as efficiency often confuses urgency with importance. It was necessary to reduce noise to hear what needed care, necessary to be quiet to recognize legitimate desires, limits, fatigue. I didn't become another person, I simply came closer to myself, and that is enough to transform roots, priorities, presences, endings. I understood that life blossoms in environments with the right space, light and water, and that silence offers precisely that careful climate. I reduced justifications, expanded presence, reorganized the house, sharpened my ear, prioritized sleep, respected my Sundays, reduced public explanations. Transformation gained constancy when I stopped dramatizing and began repeating small choices week after week with serenity. The fruits arrived discreetly. Less guilt for saying no, more gratitude, more focus, more kindness with myself and with those who walked near. That is the kind of wealth that remains on difficult days. I went back to cooking slowly, rereading beloved books, walking without measuring distance, watering plants, listening to vinyl, conversing while truly looking into people's eyes. Silence taught the quality of time spent, reminding me it isn't leftover. It's invisible investment with interest paid in serenity. While the world shouted for speed, I offered rhythm. While it demanded proof, I offered constancy. While it required a report, I offered coherence. It wasn't about hiding, it was about showing up whole without wasting myself in justifications that only frayed my edges. I realized certain news grows better in the dark, like seeds. Celebrated within, they put down roots before seeing the sun. When they reach the light, they arrive firm, less susceptible to the winds of opinion, better prepared to sustain the season of challenges. I started choosing presence over exposure, simplicity over excess, useful truth over empty glitter, silence over noise. Conversations gained sharpness, tasks became doable, the schedule breathed margins, and I finally fit entirely into my days. Without the constant showcase, meetings lasted longer, farewells hurt less, new starts became gentle, paths stayed honest. That's when I understood that to prosper is to be able to choose calm, even surrounded by noisy invitations, preserving peace as a living priority. And I went on giving thanks quietly, every day too. On this path I also erred, and silence helped me welcome stumbles without headlines, without turning a fall into identity. I was able to correct roots in private, with those who truly mattered, asking for help honestly, without dramatizing, without seeking public absolution. I learned that vulnerability usually speaks softly, chooses intimate hours, seeks an attentive ear, prefers a safe lap to a crowded stage. I began to measure my failures less, and my return to the world more. Repair, sincere apology, renewed commitment, repeated change. I noticed that guilt loses strength when it meets serene responsibility, and that shame diminishes when the truth arrives whole. I promised less, delivered more, explained little, practiced presence, let time prove instead of defending every small action. Life responded with gradual trust, returning opportunities, repairing bridges, strengthening bonds that stood without constant spectacle. I discovered that to grow is to lower the echo and raise the substance, choosing less announcement and more truth contained in gestures. When I relapsed, I returned to breathing, reorganized routines, asked forgiveness, remade possible promises, and kept walking with humble steps. Consistency came from the silence that welcomed, taught, aligned my priorities, reminding me that true progress accepts intervals and fresh starts. That's how I matured without hardening, keeping tenderness enough to restart, and firmness enough to protect needed boundaries whenever necessary again. Today I can name it without hesitation. It wasn't money that transformed me. It was silence, patient, steady, generous. Money stabilized the ground, paid bills, organized spreadsheets. Silence organized the heart, separated noise from music, haste from meaning. It taught me to open doors with discernment and to close windows that drained my attention, protecting what nourishes me. I gained space inside, and in that space fit rest, courage, clarity, tenderness, better choices, true encounters, necessary farewells. I learned to give what I have without abandoning myself, to say yes without losing myself, to say no without guilt. If you ask me for a formula, I answer with presence. If you ask for the secret, I point to time. If you doubt, I offer constancy. The peace I cultivate needs no permission or audience. It only needs daily practice, respect for limits, attentive silence. I keep choosing serenity as a living priority, even surrounded by noisy invitations, because I recognize its concrete value in my routine. Silence didn't buy anything for me. It simply introduced me better to myself, allowing me to walk whole, without waste. And it's from that wholeness that I offer what I can, simple and real, without subtext, without hidden debt, with sustainable joy. Peace is cultivated quietly, daily, with patience, and I will keep doing that today. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow new publications. Your support helps more people find these reflections. Thank you for being here.